a cherry case like you. Just be quiet. I mean, it's pretty obvious that Bartimaeus needs to get to Jesus. He was a man that could see, and now he can't. He desperately needs to get to Jesus. He's crying out, trying to get to Jesus. But the crowd, rather than recognizing where Bartimaeus was, doesn't offer any help to him. They say, be quiet. Either the master is too busy, or we want to make sure he has enough time to pay attention to us instead. But what does Bartimaeus do? The crowd starts telling him to be quiet. He doesn't sit back and sulk in silence. He doesn't pull out his phone and hand it to somebody else and say, hey, type this on Twitter for me. He starts shouting louder. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. The crowd's trying to silence him, and he shouts even louder, trying to get his voice to rise above theirs. He was one voice crying out through all the noise. Yet somehow Jesus heard him. Somehow, above all the noise, all the chaos, all the people that were in that crowd probably pressing up against Jesus, probably trying to get close to him, trying to get his attention, Jesus hears the voice of this blind beggar along the roadside who people are trying to silence. He hears him. The one voice gets the ear of heaven. And notice what Jesus does. Jesus stops. He hears Bartimaeus crying. He just stops where he's at. St. Jerome, he had this to say about it. He believes Jesus stopped intentionally. Because he knew Bartimaeus was blind. And if he had kept walking and this blind man was trying to get to him, it would be an impossible task for Bartimaeus to do, wouldn't it? There's just the difficulty of him being blind, but that doesn't describe the terrain of the road that they're walking on. If it's like any government road, it's a disaster. So Jesus stops. He stops so that way when Bartimaeus comes to him, there was a clear pathway, that there was no obstacle between Jesus and this man who needed his help. Jesus stopped. And not only does Jesus stop, he wants to make sure that Bartimaeus knows that he wants him to come here. What does he do? He tells his disciples, he tells his followers, get him and bring him to me. Tell him, come on. And luckily, not everybody in the crowd were mean and trying to silence Bartimaeus. Some of them come to him and they say to him, take heart, get up, he's calling you. Jesus heard you, he wants you to come to him. And how does Bartimaeus respond? He sees, he doesn't see, but he sees the opportunity. He sees it. He immediately gets up, tosses off his cloak. You realize how big of a deal for this beggar to toss his cloak was? That cloak was his life. They sing about this roadside day after day, through all kinds of different weather. His only shelter was that cloak. At night, he didn't have anywhere to go to sleep and keep warm. It was that cloak that kept him warm. That cloak was everything to Bartimaeus. But the second he finds out Jesus is saying, come here, he throws aside, he goes. He leaves behind his cloak. He leaves behind the voices telling him to be quiet. He gets up immediately and goes to Jesus. Jesus, what does Jesus say to him? This is, to me, there are some funny questions in the Bible. This is one of them. What do you want me to do for you? Bartimaeus is blind. It's probably pretty obvious. It's obvious that about Jesus because he's able to hear this one voice over all through the crowd and call out to Bartimaeus saying, "Come to me." And when Bartimaeus comes, and Jesus even stops to make sure Bartimaeus has a clear path to get to him. And what does he say to him when he arrives? "What do you want me to do for you?" Now, Jesus doesn't waste words, okay? Jesus isn't being goofy here. He isn't being funny, even though it is funny to read. You see, not everybody who has a disability wants to get rid of it. Think about it. If you're a person who doesn't want to work, doesn't want to have to do anything to earn a living, that disability is a way out for you. So when Bartimaeus gets to Jesus, Jesus is asking that question, what do you want me to do? Yes, it's obvious Bartimaeus is blind. But Jesus is telling Bartimaeus, hey, think about what you're asking me to do. Do you really want me to do this? Because this is going to change your life. This is going to change your situation in life. This is going to change what you are able and capable of doing in this life. Do you really want this? Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? And Bartimaeus says, well, you see, I can't. Then he says, well, he goes on, he says, my teacher. The NRSV does a very poor job here. Okay? It very much undersells this word. You see, the typical word that they would cry out is rabbi, which is a term of respect. But Bartimaeus takes it a step further. He uses it a distinguished, highly respected, highly regarded form of the word rabbi. When he talks to Jesus here, he says, my teacher. He gives Jesus the utmost respect. He says, my teacher, I want to see you again. What does Jesus tell him? Go. Your faith has made you well. Bartimaeus had the faith to keep shouting when everybody's going to be quiet. And it was that faith that led Jesus opening his eyes again. So how are you and I to respond when the crowd tries to silence us, to keep us from Jesus? We got to be like Bartimaeus. We got to cry out louder. It doesn't matter where you're at, whether you or I, it doesn't matter if we're morally bankrupt. It doesn't matter if we're being controlled by our temptations. It doesn't matter if our entire life is falling apart. It doesn't even matter if it's falling apart because we pulled all the threads to make it fall apart. We recognize that we need Jesus. We need to be like Bartimaeus and cry out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Understand this morning that Jesus has stopped and he's calling for you. No matter what it is that you're carrying with you today, no matter what it is you think is that Jesus is too busy to hear that. I'm not sure if I told you guys this story before. But when I was about, 7 or 8, I had a cat. I have cats now, but I actually liked cats back then. But I have them now. And this cat was named Lucy, and one day, my mom did not like indoor pets, so Lucy lived outside. One day I went outside to find Lucy, and she was gone. She just wasn't there. She had run off, like cats do. Someone once told me, no one actually owns a cat. A cat decides where it's going to live for a little while and decides when it's going to move on. That's what happened. Lucy decided she didn't want to live there and she left. And you can imagine my 8, 9-year-old self was devastated. Like, this cat's gone. And so, just like before, my mom would take me to Sunday school. She would take me to Wednesday nights. And the teacher would ask, Jason, we have a prayer request, and I would pray for this cat. And keep in mind, we lived on the other side of town. And every night, we'd go across town, I'd pray, God, send my cat back. And it got to a point, like a month or two later, that my mom was like, I got to help Jason move on, right? He's got to come to grips with this loss of his cat. So she said, Jason, we cat's gone. You're just going to have to ask God to help you heal and move on. If you learn anything about me is I'm stubborn. And I don't always listen so good. I'm surprised Nicole didn't say anything here, but whatever. Okay.
What?
And so I kept praying. And on Wednesday night, I go to church, and as I'm leaving the church, guess who I found outside the church door? Lucy was right there. My mom to this day still laughs about the time she told me to quit praying, and God answered prayer anyway. But in the middle of the discussion, Noel said to me, Jason, it's just a cat. But to me, it wasn't just a cat. It meant something so much more. And so many times we carry with us burdens and things that break our heart. We think, we know what the Bible says. We know the Sunday school answer. All we have to do is cry out. We think, this really isn't that big a deal. This really isn't that important. I don't want to waste the Master's time with my little concern here. It's only a cat. But Jesus says, cry out to me anyway. He loves you. And the things that breaks your heart breaks his. And whatever has your heart broken this morning, no, Jesus stopped and he's calling for you. He has heard your cry, and the path is clear, it's wide open. All you have to do is come to him. When Bartimaeus realized this, that Jesus is calling him, that the opportunity is right there, that opportunity of a lifetime. What to do? He gets up. He doesn't wait 5 minutes. He doesn't stop and make a pros and cons list. He doesn't try out and navigate all these different angles. No, he knows Jesus is calling him, and he immediately gets up to seize the opportunity. He gets up, and instead of sitting there wallowing in his own self-pity, instead of walling about the circumstances and how he got to that moment, what does he do? He gets up and he takes a step towards the solution. Jesus is the solution he's been waiting for. It all starts with him. And it's all going to end with him too. If we want to change our world, if we want to do something to change Greensburg Church Nazarene, it's going to start with us presenting Jesus to this lost and broken community. He will do the work. He will change hearts and minds. And in the process of doing it, in order to do that, Jesus is the solution to your heart and to your life. And he's here calling you this morning. And we have to respond in the same way as Bartimaeus. We have to get up without delay and take that first step towards the solution. Take that first step towards Jesus. And the one thing we know about Jesus from Scripture is it only takes one step. It takes one step. You turn your life and you decide you're going to take that first step of victory toward Jesus. What does it do? It comes to you. You know the story of the prodigal son, am I right? Jesus tells the story of the son that squandered all away his wealth and riotous living. And he thinks to himself, if I just go home, maybe my father will let me work it as a slave or as a servant. But he turns around and takes that step towards home. And when the father sees him, he immediately runs to him and meets him with open arms. And that was the story of how much God loves you. It's the story of how much Jesus loves you. He stopped, he's calling to you. And all he's waiting for you to just take that step towards him. And he's waiting there with open arms. We have to be like Bartimaeus. We have to have the faith to get up and take a step toward him. And then not only does Bartimaeus hear Jesus cry and realize Jesus is calling him, not only does he get up and move immediately, what does he do? He lets go of everything that might hinder him. He's blind. He's getting up to walk this road to however far away Jesus is. He doesn't want to be tangled up in his coat when he gets there. He doesn't want to trip over it. As it's laying at his feet, what's he do? He casts it off to the side. I'm done with this. I don't need it. I'm going to Jesus. quiet. He doesn't have time for you. He's not interested in your situation of life. You got here on your own. You made this mistake. You're going to have to live with it. No, Bartimaeus doesn't listen to them. What does he do? He casts off everything that will hinder him, and he goes to Jesus. You see, when the voices in your own head, when the voices in your world telling you Jesus doesn't care, don't bother bringing that into the church. There's nothing he can do for you because you made this mistake for yourself. You know what we have to do? We have to block our ears. We have to refuse to hear what they have to say because Jesus is calling. And that's the only voice that matters. Amen. Because in Jesus, you will find freedom now. You'll find someone to help you lift that weight of that burden. You'll find someone to help you turn your life around. But we have to respond to Jesus' calling. Church, this morning, many of us, maybe we've already given our burdens to Jesus. Maybe we don't carry those. But we have to stop and ask ourselves, are we like the disciples who go and help people get to Jesus, or are we the ones that tell them to be quiet? Because make no mistake about it, there are homosexuals living in our area that are desperately crying out for the love of Jesus. And when they cry out saying they need Jesus, what do you say to them? When they ask if they come to your church, what do you say? Because if you're saying be quiet, no, you can't come here, you're in the wrong. What about that father that's walked out his family? He's carrying the brokenness of that decision. He's carrying the weight of that failure. And he comes to you and says, well, can I come to your church? What are you going to say to him? We're going to say, no, you can't come here, you deadbeat. Get back and take care of your own family. Are you going to say, come to Jesus, because Jesus is calling? And all that mess that you made, he's got a broom big enough to help you clean it up. Make no mistake about it, when they come here, they have to be ready, they have to be willing on their own hearts, on their own minds, they have to be willing to accept the healing that Jesus has to offer. But that's not on you. That's not on me. That's on them, but what's on us is, are we helping them get to Jesus? Are we guiding them to his presence? Because, make no mistake, Jesus stopped. He has cleared the pathway. It's up to you and I to get up and do what Jesus says and go get him and bring him here. And notice how I say that. We have to go get him and bring him here. It's not good enough to have a sign down by the road. It's not good enough to have a fancy website, which we do. It's not good enough to have a fancy website that has a chat feature that tells your pastor whenever somebody's on there. We have to go to where they are, because that's exactly what Jesus did for us. Isn't there a little song that says that? When I could not go to where he was, he came to me. That's what we have to do, church. Make no mistake, Jesus is calling. And we have to help people remove every obstacle in their way. Even if they're a little lost, even if they have no clue what they're doing, even if they come in here to take communion and they've dumped every one of the communion cups on the floor. We got to help them find Jesus. So my question to you, church, is this morning is, we know Jesus is calling. And if you've been crying out to him about something in your life, something that's happening in your family, something that's happening at your job, if you've been crying out to him, understand this. Jesus has heard you, and he is calling you. Jesus has heard you, and he is calling you. But will you come to him? Make no mistake about it, that person that is asking you about your church, that's asking you about the things you believe in. They've heard that Jesus is calling. They've heard that deep echo, that deep whisper into their hearts and their minds, and they can't explain it. They don't know where it came from. And you and I know what it is. It's Jesus is calling. And maybe they're not here this morning, and they can't come accept Jesus for themselves. But guess what? God has called you and I to be intercessors. We can't pray pray for salvation for them, but we can pray that they encounter the God of salvation. So this morning we're going to stand and sing this song together. And if you need to come and cry out to Jesus, know He's calling. He's saying, come forward. The pathway is clear. Come forward. If there's somebody that you've been talking to, somebody that the Lord's laying on your heart that you know is whispering, that He's been whispering and calling to them. As this song's praying, I know they're not here. I know they can't go for themselves, but maybe God's saying, I want you to go to where they are. Then this morning, come and tell God, I'm willing, send me. God, you want the words to say. So as this song plays,